The metal chair scraped against the floor as Commander Zexthil shifted his weight. His 4 arms hung loose at his sides, but his claws kept clicking against the table. The sound made the 3 council members sitting across from him nervous. They had good reason to be nervous. Zexthil was the only Corvani commander who had fought humans and lived to tell about it. The interrogation room was cold and gray. Bright lights shone down from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across Zexthil's scarred face. His shell had once been a bright blue color, marking him as nobility among his people. Now it was cracked and dull, stained with the memories of battles he wished he could forget. "Begin your testimony," said Council Member Vextar, her voice steady but her eyes showing fear. She was Altarian, one of the peaceful species that had surrendered to the Corvani Empire without firing a shot. She had never seen real war before the humans came. Zexthil's mandibles clicked together as he thought about where to start. How could he explain what the humans had done? How could he make these soft council members understand what his people had faced? "We thought they would be easy," he said finally. His voice was rough, like grinding stone. The intelligence reports said they were young, barely 300 years in space, no real military, no advanced weapons. Just another primitive species that would bow down when they saw our ships. He paused, looking down at his hands. 2 of his fingers were missing, lost in the battle. For New Montana, the humans had taken them, along with so much more. I commanded the 7th Fleet, 200 ships, the pride of the Corvani military. We had conquered 17 species before the humans. 17 species that saw our ships and knew they were beaten. The Altarians sent surrender messages before we even entered their system. The Zenthari tried to fight, but gave up after we destroyed one of their cities. That was how war worked. Show your strength, and the weak surrender. Council Member Drakon leaned forward. He was Zenthari, and Zexthil could see the old pain in his eyes. What made the humans different? Zexthil's laugh was bitter and harsh. Everything made them different. He stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. Stars hung in the darkness like tiny lights, peaceful and quiet. It was hard to believe that out there, among those stars, humans were building more ships and training more soldiers. We jumped into their system on the 3rd day of what they call October. The planet was called New Montana. Our sensors showed it had about 8 million humans living on it. Small cities, some farms, nothing that looked like military bases. Perfect for a quick conquest. Zexthil turned back to face the council members. We sent the standard message. Surrender now, and your people will be moved to work camps. Resist, and we will destroy your cities. It was the same message we had sent to 17 other species. 16 of them surrendered immediately. The Zenthari tried to negotiate. What did the humans do? Asked Council Member Yilsith, the 3rd member of the panel. She was from a species that had never been conquered, had never seen war at all. They sent a message back. Just 4 words from someone called Admiral Kate Morrison. She said, "Come and take it." That was all. No negotiations. No questions about terms. No begging for mercy. Just those 4 words. Zexthil sat back down, his chair groaning under his weight. We thought it was a joke, or maybe a translation error. So we sent another message, explaining what would happen if they resisted. We told them about the other species we had conquered. We showed them pictures of destroyed cities. We offered them one last chance to surrender. And, Vextar prompted, the same message. Come and take it. This time it came from a different ship, with a different name. Then another message from another ship. Then another. Soon we were getting hundreds of messages, all saying the same thing. Come and take it. Every human ship in the system was sending us the same 4 words. Zexthil's claws clicked against the table again. The sound was getting faster, more nervous. My intelligence officer said it was probably their way of buying time. Maybe they were evacuating their cities or moving their military assets. We had seen it before, so we waited and watched. "What did you see?" Drakon asked. "Nothing. They were not evacuating. They were not moving their military. They were just living their normal lives, going to work, taking their children to school, farming their fields, like they did not care that a fleet of warships was sitting in their system." The council members looked at each other. This was not normal behavior for a species about to be conquered. After 6 hours, we began the attack. Standard orbital bombardment of their 3 largest cities. We expected to see mass panic, maybe some attempts at evacuation. Instead, we saw something else. Zexthil paused, his eyes distant as he remembered. They started singing. "Singing?" Yilseth asked. "The humans have something called radio. They broadcast sound waves across their planet. During our attack, every radio station on New Montana started playing the same song. A simple melody with words about standing together and never giving up. 8 million humans, facing certain death, and they were singing. The room fell silent. Even the soft hum of the air recycling system seemed too loud. That was when I knew we were not fighting a normal species. Normal species run when they see overwhelming force. Normal species try to save themselves. Normal species do not sing songs while their cities burn. Zexthil looked directly at each council member. That was just the beginning. As humans taught us that there are worse things than death. They taught us that some species will do anything, become anything, to protect what they love. And they taught us that when you corner a species like that, you better hope you can kill every last one of them. Because if you don't, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, they will make sure you regret it for the rest of your very short life. Zexthil's claws dug deeper into the metal table as he continued his story. The council members sat perfectly still, hanging on every word. They had heard rumors about what happened at New Montana, but no one had ever gotten the full story from a survivor. The orbital bombardment lasted 3 hours, Zexthil said. We destroyed their 3 largest cities completely, turned them into glass and ash. 2 million humans dead in the first day. Any normal species would have surrendered immediately. He paused, looking at his missing fingers again. The humans sent us another message. This time it was not come. And take it, this time it was coordinates. Landing zones where we could bring our troops down to the surface. They were inviting us to land. Council member Vextar shifted uncomfortably. That seems like surrender. That is what we thought too. My ground commander, General Kexvolum, said the humans had finally seen sense. They knew they could not win, so they were giving up. He took 50,000 troops down to the surface. Elite soldiers, the best the Corvani Empire had to offer. Zexthil stood up again and walked to the window. The stars outside seemed colder now, more distant. 6 hours later, we lost contact with the entire ground force. Lost contact? Drakon asked. Gone. 50,000 soldiers. Just gone. No distress signals, no battle reports, no emergency transmissions. Nothing. One moment they were setting up landing zones, the next moment complete silence. The alien commander turned back to face the council. We sent reconnaissance drones to find them. What we saw changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. He sat down heavily, his shell scraping against the chair. The humans had not surrendered. They had set a trap. But it was not a normal trap. It was something much worse. What kind of trap? Yilseth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They had evacuated the entire area around the landing zones. Moved every civilian out, even the animals. Then they filled the buildings with explosives. Not big explosives meant to destroy our ships. Small ones hidden in every room, every doorway, every piece of furniture. Zexthel's voice grew quieter as he remembered. Our soldiers walked into those buildings thinking they were securing human cities. Instead, they walked into a killing maze. The humans had studied our tactics, learned how we moved, how we cleared buildings. They knew exactly where we would go and when. But that is not the worst part, he continued. The worst part was what they did next. The room fell silent again. Even the air recycling system seemed to hold its breath. The humans had captured some of our soldiers from the first wave. Maybe 100 troops who had been taken prisoner when the traps went off. We expected to receive ransom demands or prisoner exchange offers. Instead, we received something else. Zextel's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his people. They sent us recordings, not of torture, not of executions. They sent us recordings of our own soldiers screaming. Council member Drakon leaned forward. Screaming from torture? No, screaming from medical procedures. The humans had been studying our anatomy, learning how our bodies worked. They broadcast the sounds of our soldiers being dissected while they were still alive. Not to hurt them, but to learn from them. Vexstar made a choking sound. That is monstrous. We thought so too, until we learned the truth. The humans broadcasting those screams were not the ones performing the procedures. They were prisoners. Themselves. Human prisoners who had been captured by our forces weeks before the battle even started. The council members looked confused. Zextel continued his explanation. The humans had been infiltrating our forward bases for months, letting themselves be captured on purpose. While we thought we were interrogating human prisoners, they were actually studying us, learning our language, our technology, our biology. When the real battle started, they already knew everything about us. How is that possible? Yilseth asked. Because they think differently than we do. When we capture enemies, we try to break them for information. When humans are captured, they gather information. They turn being a prisoner into a mission. Zexthil walked to the far end of the room, putting distance between himself and the council. 3 days after we lost our ground force, a human ship appeared in our formation. A small fighter, badly damaged, drifting without power. We thought it was a survivor trying to escape. Was it? Drakon asked. In a way, it was Lieutenant Colonel Jake Sullivan. He had been one of our prisoners for 2 weeks. We had been interrogating him, trying to learn about human military plans. He seemed broken, defeated. He answered our questions and gave us information about human defenses. Zextel's laugh was bitter. He was not broken. He was learning, while we thought we were breaking. He was studying our ship designs, our security procedures, our daily routines. When he escaped, he took all of that knowledge with him. But that is not why his ship appeared in our formation, Zextel continued. He came back to deliver a message. Not through radio or data transmission. He came back to deliver it in person. The alien commander sat back down, his 4 arms hanging loose at his sides. Jake Sullivan docked his damaged fighter with my flagship. He walked onto my bridge, alone and unarmed. My security team surrounded him, weapons ready. He ignored them completely. What was his message? Vexstar asked. He had a small box with him. Inside the box was a data pad. The data pad contained detailed plans for the complete destruction of the Corvani Empire. Not just military targets, but civilian populations, breeding colonies, even our homeworld. Plans that were so detailed, so complete, that they could only have been prepared by someone who understood our society better than we understood it ourselves. Zextel's voice dropped to a whisper. Jake Sullivan looked me in the eye and said, This is what we will do to you if you do not leave this system immediately. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Then he handed me a second datapad. This one contained something else. Pictures of human children. Hundreds of them, from the cities we had destroyed. Children who were now dead because of our bombardment. The alien commander's claws clicked against the table one final time. Jake Sullivan said, "These are the faces we see when we close our eyes. These are the reasons we will never stop hunting you. You killed our children, so we studied you. We learned everything about you. And now we know exactly how to kill every last one of your people." He walked off my ship the same way he had walked on, alone, unarmed, and completely unafraid. 3 hours later, his fighter exploded in a ball of antimatter. He had turned himself into a weapon, taking out 2 of our escort ships when he died. Zexthel looked directly at each council member. That was when I realized we were not fighting soldiers. We were fighting an entire species that had decided we needed to die. And they were willing to study us, learn from us, and become us if that was what it took to make it happen. The humans had turned war into a science, and we were their test subjects. The silence in the room stretched on as Zexthel gathered his thoughts. His shell had grown paler during his testimony, and the council members noticed how his breathing had become more labored. Whatever he was about to tell them was worse than nice. What had come before? After New Montana, the war spread to other systems. Zexthel continued. The High Command was angry. They had lost an entire fleet to a primitive species, and they wanted revenge. They sent me to the Kepler system with 300 ships and orders to show no mercy. He paused, looking down at his hands. I should have refused the mission. I should have told them what I had learned about humans. But I was a soldier, and soldiers follow orders. Council member Drakon shifted in his seat. What happened at Kepler? The humans were waiting for us. Not just with ships and weapons, but with something much worse. They had been preparing for months, maybe years. They knew we would come for revenge, and they had planned for it. Zexthel stood up and began pacing around the small room. When we arrived at Kepler, we found 4 human worlds, all of them heavily populated, all of them defended. But the defense was not what we expected. What did you expect? Vextar asked. Space battles, orbital defenses, fighter squadrons, the normal things that species use to defend their worlds. Instead, we found nothing. No ships, no weapons platforms, no military installations. Just empty space around 4 peaceful worlds. The alien commander stopped pacing and looked directly at the council members. General Amy Patterson was in command of the human forces. She sent us a message as soon as we arrived. She said she wanted to negotiate a ceasefire. She offered to meet with me aboard a neutral station to discuss terms. That sounds reasonable, Yelseth said. It was a trap. Not the kind of trap we expected, but something far worse. Amy Patterson did meet with me. She was polite, professional, even friendly. She offered us food and drink from her own planet. She showed us pictures of her family, her children. Zexthel's voice grew quieter. Then she showed us what she had done to the 4 worlds in the Kepler system. What had she done? Drakon asked. She had terraformed them. Changed their atmosphere, their climate, their entire ecosystem. Made them perfect for human life and deadly for Corvani biology. But she had not done it with machines or chemicals. She had done it with living things. The council members looked confused. Zexthel continued his explanation. The humans had created new forms of life. Bacteria, plants, animals that would spread across a planet and change everything about it. They called it biological warfare, but it was more than that. It was ecosystem warfare. Amy Patterson explained it to me very carefully. These new life forms would not just kill Corvani, who landed on the planet. They would change the planet itself. The air would become poison to us. The water would become acid. The soil would become toxic. In 50 years, no Corvani would be able to survive on any of those worlds. Zexthul sat back down, his shell scraping against the chair. But humans could live there perfectly. In fact, the changes would make the planets better for human life than they had been before. That is biological warfare, Vextar said, her voice shaking. It is banned by galactic law. Amy Patterson knew that. She said she did not care about galactic law. She cared about protecting her people. She told me that if we continued the war, she would release these life forms on every Corvani world. She would turn our entire empire into a human paradise and a Corvani death trap. The room fell silent again. The implications of what Zexthul was describing were almost too terrible to comprehend. But that was not the worst part, he continued. The worst part was what she showed me next. What was that? Drakon asked, though his voice suggested he did not really want to know. She had captured a Corvani breeding colony. 3 million of our people, including 200,000 children. She had not hurt them. She had not killed them. She had done something much worse. Zexthu's mandibles clicked together rapidly. She had been raising the children as humans, teaching them human language, human culture, human values. The young ones believed they were human. They thought of Amy Patterson as their mother and the Corvani Empire as their enemy. Impossible, Yilseth whispered. I saw it with my own eyes. Corvani children, my own species, wearing human uniforms and saluting human flags. They spoke human languages better than they spoke Corvani. They knew human songs and human stories. They had been turned into weapons against their own people. Amy Patterson called it the future war. She said that even if we won the current conflict, these children would grow up to fight us. They would know our biology, our culture, our weaknesses. But they would think like humans, fight like humans, hate like humans. Zexthul's voice dropped to a whisper. She had created a generation of Corvani who would destroy the Corvani Empire from within. And she had done it by showing them kindness, by giving them love, by making them part of human families. That is monstrous, Vextar said. No, Zexthul replied. That is strategy. Amy Patterson was not trying to be cruel. She was trying to win. She had looked at the long term, planned for decades into the future. She had decided that the best way to defeat us was to make us defeat ourselves. But the most terrifying part was what she told me at the end of our meeting. She said that everything she had shown me was just the beginning. The ecosystem warfare, the captured children, the biological weapons. All of it was just preparation for what would come next. The alien commander looked directly at each council member. She said that humans had been studying war for their entire history. They had fought each other for thousands of years, learning every possible way to destroy an enemy. And now they were ready to use all of that knowledge against us. Amy Patterson handed me a datapad containing the complete history of human warfare. Every battle, every strategy, every weapon they had ever used against each other. She said, "This is what we do to species we love. Imagine what we will do to species we hate." She gave me 24 hours to withdraw from the Kepler system. If I did not leave, she would show me what human warfare really looked like. She would stop holding back and start fighting seriously. Zexthul's claws clicked against the table one final time. I ordered the withdrawal immediately. I had seen enough to know that we were not just fighting humans. We were fighting a species. It had turned war into an art form. A species that could plan battles across generations and think of strategies that would never occur to any other race. We were fighting a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to destroy themselves, and they were very good at it. Zexthil's breathing had become shallow and rapid. The council members could see that telling the story was taking a terrible toll on him. His shell had lost almost all of its color, and his forearms trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. The withdrawal from Kepler should have been the end of it, he said quietly. High Command was furious, but they were also scared. They had never seen anything like human warfare before. They decided to pull back and regroup. He looked up at the council members, his eyes filled with a pain that went deeper than physical wounds. We thought we had time. We thought we could study the humans, learn their weaknesses, develop new strategies. We were wrong. What happened? Council member Drakon asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be terrible. The humans followed us. Not with ships or fleets, but with something much worse. They followed us with hope. The council members looked confused. Zexthil continued his explanation. 3 months after Kepler, we received a transmission from our homeworld. It was not from our military or our government. It was from our own people, Corvani civilians, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. What did they say? Vextar asked. They said the humans had come to help them. Thousands of human ships had arrived at our homeworld, not to attack, but to provide aid. Medical supplies, food, technology. The humans claimed they wanted to help rebuild the cities we had destroyed in our own civil wars. Zexthil's mandibles clicked together slowly. Our people welcomed them. After generations of war and suffering under the Empire, they saw the humans as liberators. They did not know what we knew about human warfare. The humans were led by Admiral Nicole Carter. She was different from the other human commanders I had encountered. She was not cruel or threatening. She was kind, gentle, almost motherly. She brought doctors to heal our wounded, teachers to educate our children, engineers to rebuild our cities. That sounds like a good thing, Yilseth said hesitantly. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. Nicole Carter was not conquering our people. She was saving them, and they loved her for it. Zexthil stood up and walked to the window again. The stars outside seemed to mock him with their peaceful light. Within 6 months, half of our population worshipped the humans. They saw them as gods who had come to end their suffering. They turned against the Empire, against their own military, against everything we represented. Admiral Carter did not have to fire a single shot. She conquered our homeworld with medicine and food. She destroyed our government with schools and hospitals. She turned our people against us by showing them what life could be like without war. The alien commander turned back to face the council. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what she did next. Which was? Drakon asked. She asked our people to help her end the war, not by fighting, but by providing information. She wanted to know everything about our military, our weaknesses, our plans. And our people gave her everything she asked for. Zexthil's voice grew quieter. They did not do it because they were forced to. They did it because they believed it was the right thing to do. Nicole Carter had convinced them that the Corvani Empire was evil and that humanity was good. She had turned our own people into willing traders. Within a year, the humans knew everything about us. Our ship designs, our military codes, our strategic plans. They knew where every fleet was located, where every base was hidden, where every weapon was stored. Our own people had given them a complete map of our empire. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. An entire species had been turned against itself through kindness rather than force. But Nicole Carter still had not shown us what human warfare really looked like. That happened at the Battle of Kepler Station. I thought you said you withdrew from Kepler, Vextar said. We did, but we returned 6 months later with a new strategy. High Command had decided that the only way to defeat humans was to force them into a conventional battle. Ship against ship, soldier against soldier. No tricks, no traps, no psychological. Warfare. Zextel's laugh was bitter and empty. We brought 800 ships to Kepler Station, the largest fleet in Corvani history. We surrounded the station completely. There was no escape, no possibility of human reinforcements. We demanded their surrender. What did they do? Yulseth asked. Admiral Nicole Carter was in command of the station. She had maybe 50 ships and 20,000 people. She was completely outnumbered and outgunned. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered immediately. But she did not surrender? Drakon asked. She did something that still haunts my dreams. She activated something called the Thermos Protocol. I had never heard of it before, and I pray I never see it again. Zextel sat back down, his shell scraping against the chair. Nicole Carter sent out a general broadcast to every human ship in the system. She said that Kepler Station was lost, that there was no hope of victory, that everyone was going to die. She said that their only choice was how they wanted to die. She offered them two options. They could surrender and become prisoners of war, or they could volunteer for the Thermos Protocol. She explained exactly what the protocol involved. Every volunteer would pilot a ship loaded with antimatter directly into our fleet. It was a suicide mission with no possibility of survival. The alien commander's voice dropped to a whisper. 20,000 humans volunteered immediately. Not soldiers, not warriors, but civilians. Teachers, doctors, engineers, children old. Enough to pilot ships. They all volunteered to die. Impossible, Vextar breathed. I watched it happen. 20,000 humans said goodbye to their families, climbed into ships, and flew directly at our fleet. They were not screaming or crying or begging for mercy. They were singing the same song they had sung at New Montana. The first wave of suicide ships hit our outer perimeter. 50 ships, 50 explosions, 50 holes in our formation. But they kept coming. Wave after wave of humans, all singing the same song, all flying directly into our guns. Zextel's claws clicked against the table. We tried to stop them. We fired everything we had. We destroyed hundreds of their ships before they could reach us, but they kept coming. Always singing, always smiling, always volunteers. After 6 hours, we had lost 200 ships. Our formation was broken. Our morale was shattered. We had killed thousands of humans, but they had shown us something that no military training could prepare us for. What was that? Drakon asked. They had shown us a species that could turn love into a weapon. These humans were not dying because they hated us. They were dying because they loved each other. They were protecting their families, their friends, their way of life. And they were willing to sacrifice everything for that love. Nicole Carter sent us one final message before. Her ship exploded. She said, "This is what you are fighting. Not ships or weapons or soldiers. You are fighting our love for each other. And we have an unlimited supply of that." Zextel looked directly at each council member. That was when I realized that we could never win. We were fighting a species that had weaponized their own emotions. They had turned their love into hatred, their compassion into cruelty, their hope into despair for their enemies. We were not just fighting humans. We were fighting everything that made them human. And they were very good at being human. The interrogation room had grown cold during Zextel's testimony. The 3 council members sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything they had heard. The alien commander looked older now, as if telling his story had drained something vital from him. After Kepler Station, there was no more fighting, Zextel said quietly. Not because we had won, but because we finally understood what we were facing. He looked down at his hands, studying the missing fingers as if seeing them for the first time. 3 days after the battle, we received a message from Fleet Admiral Peter Clark. He was speaking for all of humanity, he said. He had a simple offer for us. What kind of offer? Council member Vexstar asked, though her voice was barely a whisper. Surrender completely, or face total extinction? Not just military defeat, but the complete elimination of every Corvani in the galaxy. He gave us 72 hours to decide. Zexthul stood up slowly, his movements stiff and painful. High Command laughed at first. We still had thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. How could the humans threaten our entire species? Then, Peter Clark sent us the proof. The alien commander walked to the far wall and leaned against it, as if he needed the support to continue. The humans had been building something in secret. Not ships or weapons, but something much worse. They had created a virus. A biological weapon? Drakon asked. Yes, but not the kind that kills quickly. This virus was designed specifically for Corvani biology. It would spread through our population slowly, taking months to show symptoms. By the time we realized we were infected, it would be too late to stop it. Zexthil's mandibles clicked together slowly. The virus would not just kill us. It would destroy our ability to reproduce. Within 2 generations, there would be no more Corvani anywhere in the galaxy. We would simply fade away into extinction. That is genocide, Yelseth said, her voice shaking with horror. Peter Clark knew that. He said he did not want to use the virus. He said it went against everything humans believed in. But he also said that his people had voted, and they had decided that our species was too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. The room fell silent again. The implications were too terrible to comprehend. But that was not the worst part, Zexthul continued. The worst part was what he told us next. What was that? Vexstar asked. He said that the virus already existed. It had been completed months earlier, before the Battle of Kepler Station. The humans had the power to destroy our entire species, and they had chosen not to use it. Zexthul pushed himself away from the wall and walked back to his chair. Everything we had seen, every horrible battle, every terrifying strategy, all of it had been the humans holding back. They had been fighting us with restraint. Peter Clark sent us detailed files showing exactly how they could have won the war. At any time, they had infiltrated our computer systems on the first day of fighting. They could have shut down our ships, opened our airlocks, turned off our life support. They chose not to. They had developed weapons that could destroy entire star systems. They chose not to use them. They had strategies that could have wiped out our fleets without losing a single human life. They chose not to implement them. Zexthul sat down heavily, his shell scraping against the metal chair. The humans had been playing with us, like a parent teaching a child how dangerous fire can be. They let us burn ourselves just enough to learn the lesson. Why? Drakon asked. Why would they hold back if they could have ended the war immediately? Because they wanted us to understand. Peter Clark explained it very carefully. Humans did not want to be conquerors or destroyers. They wanted to be teachers. The alien commander looked directly at each council member. The humans knew that other species would eventually discover them. They knew there would be wars, conflicts, attempts at conquest. They wanted to send a message to the entire galaxy. What message? Yelseth asked. That humanity was not to be threatened, ever, by anyone, for any reason. Zexthil's voice grew stronger as he continued. Peter Clark showed us recordings from human schools. Children, barely old enough to walk, learning about warfare and strategy. Not because humans loved violence, but because they understood that the galaxy was a dangerous place. He showed us human factories that could switch from making toys to making weapons in a matter of hours. He showed us human cities that looked peaceful, but could become military bases overnight. He showed us human farmers who knew how to pilot warships and human doctors who could design biological weapons. Every human civilian was a potential soldier. Every human child was learning to fight. Every human world was a fortress waiting to be activated. They had turned their entire species into a military force without losing their humanity. The alien commander paused, letting the implications sink in. Peter Clark told us that humans had been preparing for war since they first looked up at the stars. They had spent centuries planning for every possible threat, every potential enemy. They were ready for anything. But he also told us something else, something that might have been worse than all the weapons and strategies combined. What was that? Maxstar asked. He told us that if we surrendered, if we agreed to never threaten humanity again, they would help us. They would share their technology, their medicine, their knowledge. They would treat us as friends instead of enemies. Zexthul's laugh was bitter and empty. The humans offered us a choice. We could be their enemies and face extinction, or we could be their allies and prosper. They made it clear that there was no middle ground. What did your people choose? Drakon asked. We surrendered, completely and unconditionally. Within a week, every Corvani fleet had laid down their weapons. Within a month, human ships were delivering medical supplies to our worlds. Within a year, human teachers were in our schools and human engineers were rebuilding our cities. The humans kept their word. They treated us with kindness and respect. They helped us become better than we had ever been before. But they also made sure we never forgot the lesson. Zexthul stood up one final time and walked to the window. The stars outside seemed different now, less threatening, but also less welcoming. That is why I am here, telling you this story. Because the humans asked me to. They want every species in the galaxy to understand what they learned about humanity. He turned back to face the council members. Humans are not monsters. They are not conquerors or destroyers. They are protectors. They will do anything, become anything, sacrifice anything to protect what they love. But if you threaten what they love, if you try to hurt their families or destroy their worlds, they will show you why they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They will not hate you for it. They will not enjoy destroying you. But they will do it completely, efficiently, and without hesitation. Zexthul walked toward the door, his testimony complete. The humans taught us that there are only two kinds of species in this galaxy. Those who are wise enough to be their friends, and those who are foolish enough to be their enemies. Choose wisely. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving the three council members alone with their thoughts and the terrible knowledge of what humanity was truly capable of. Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance. But somehow, the galaxy felt smaller now, and much more dangerous for those who might dare to threaten the species called human.